Now settle down, young'uns, and shake the wax out of your ears. I got a story to tell. Now you might recall those 3 dangerous women I was telling y'all about last time. That ornery quill pusher, Bad News Hannah, who'd made a name for herself, confusticating and discombobulating those no-good lying scoundrels who print what passes for news round here. The girl writes what, that cheroot-smoking, moonshine-guzzling renegade who had a price on her head for aggravating, flustering, and otherwise perturbing the ladies. And Allison, the outlaw who fancied herself a sheriff or some such, who was so out of her mind she thought she was a badger, and who might as well have been one for all the sense she made. It was down at the crossroads over that hill just yonder that their 3 paths first met, and they knew in the marrow of their bones that they all had business in this here town. You see, they'd been tracking, each unbeknownst to the other, a gang went by the name of the Fourier Gals. A meaner, more deadly nest of rattlesnakes you will never come across. Yet they masked their fell thoughts and deeds behind the veil of the righteous and the false siren song of the just. Who, after all, could possibly argue in favor of the evils of liquor, or the brutish habits of the undomesticated, soused-up men who imbibe, or the continued sufferings of the fairer sex proceeding and precipitating therefrom? But oh, my darlings, our 3 heroines, they knew those Fourier gals, for all their high-minded jawing and pontificating, was up to no good. And they intended to root out that evil and shine the light of truth on it before it might find a foothold in our peaceful, sleepy little town. And what happened next? Oh, we shall see.
Hello and welcome to Honey Badger Radio Classic number 5, Why Men Use Sex Workers. This is your host, the moon-addled lunatic, Allison Tiemann, and with me for this installment of HBR Classic and every installment thereafter is Karen Strawn, otherwise known as Gerwite's What, and Hannah Wallen, otherwise known as something completely incomprehensible. We've decided to get back to our original format that launched Honey Badger Radio once every 2 weeks, just the 3 of us. And for the faint of heart, a warning, all 3 of us are old school brawlers, so expect some shouting, maybe a bit of fisticuffs, but we've all checked our iron at the door, so hopefully no fatalities. Now let's get on with it. Sex workers speak out about what their male clients really want. And what they have to say will shock a lot of women. An article from news.com.au called Australian Sex Workers Have a Message for Women in Relationships, Understand Your Man, describes how Australian men are spending large sums of money, not solely on sex, but companionship and emotional intimacy with sex workers. The article features the aptly codenamed Mrs. Robinson, a 58-year-old escort who charges $350 for half an hour of a heightened degree of emotional intimacy. 90% of her clients range in age from 20 to 45. In some cases, her clients want a girlfriend experience. That is, intimacy plus reciprocal sexual pleasure. And sometimes they want a companionship experience without sex at all. Mrs. Robinson says, I can't tell you the number of times a client and I haven't had sex. We may just sit there and talk. We may have dinner. There's so many times that you will not have sex. Sometimes there will be a run of it where I think, wow. She continues, they just want to be with a girlfriend for an hour, cuddling, being together, talking, having that intimacy with someone. I've got clients in their 20s who want that. It's pretty amazing. I'm still in shock over how many young guys are into me. It's bizarre. Mrs. Robinson says that her clients seek her out because they've lost an emotional connection with their girlfriends or wives. Mila Jovi runs an escort agency called Honey Chow Rider. Jovi says she can turn a plain Jane into an escort, but not everyone has the right touch. Quoting Jovi, it's good if they've never done anything in the industry at all, then I can train them and teach them exactly what they need to do. If they got a really good personality and they're smart, It makes all the difference. If they can sit at a 5-star restaurant and have a conversation with a gentleman, they're fine. Some people can't do that. They're too young and silly. They have to have emotional maturity. Now, that's what sex workers and their agents have to say about what men want from the sex industry. When you look at what men themselves say, they tend to agree. Susan Breslin writes a blog called Letters from Men Who Go to Strip Clubs. Breslin started her project called Letters from John in 2008 after his conversation left her marveling at how little she and her female friends really understood about the reasons men turn to the sex industry. Men have these hidden lives, says Breslin, and the sex industry is where these hidden lives take place. Now, 11% of British men, which is where Breslin received many of her letters, admit to having visited a prostitute. 22% of disabled men say they've visited a prostitute. And twice as many men, 22%, say that they've gone to strip clubs. Many men write about years of being spurned and rejected and describe strip clubs as refuges where they no longer have to make the first move. As to why men turn to sex workers, both prostitutes and strippers, Breslin cites loneliness, a lack of intimacy, and a lack of feeling desired. This is true of the Johns who wrote into Breslin, who said they want the company as much as the sex, as it is of strip club patrons. Breslin says, I see them more similar to women than we might think. Imagine that, Breslin. Okay. Are you guys ready? Are you roaring your engines out, Karen? I see you popping up.
Well, yeah. I mean, honestly, I'm sorry if it's a little bit noisy here. I have dogs.
A wheezy dog.
Yeah. I have a wheezy old dog and I have a rambunctious new dog. So,
yes, his name is Kevin Logan.
No, it's Kevin Strong. The dog has been named. There were lots of good suggestions on my update video for a name for the dog, but Kevin just kind of stuck. And so now I have 2 female dogs, both with male names, George and Kevin. But don't assume their gender. And, their preferred pronouns are, her floofiness.
Or I thought their preferred pronouns would be some sort of anal sac secretion.
Oh!
Because that's what...
That would be actually cool. Yeah, no. George's preferred pronoun is some kind of anal sac secretion. Just all one word, some kind of anal sac secretion.
Yeah, I mean, maybe in the future those will be preferred pronouns. My preferred pronoun, and then you just fart in someone's face.
Oh, yeah, no. That's Georgia all around. She's a very farty dog. But yeah, no, it's okay, so back to the sex workers thing. I think honestly, and I read some of the comments underneath that article.
We should go into them.
Yeah, and they were, well, those men don't deserve it, and those men should treat their wives better, and blah, blah, blah. Like, a lot of it was like, and that's just male entitlement and all of this, right? And it's just like, oh my fucking God. This is why men don't show their feelings, honey, because when they actually say, it's not even about the sex. I just really crave intimacy and companionship, and I just want to feel liked, right? Then all of a sudden, you're not entitled to that. You entitled man. Oh my God, put the shoe down. Okay, I'm done. Hannah, you go.
Something just happened. Someone's got a shoe emergency.
It's the first time Karen actually stopped talking on purpose so I can talk. I should relish this moment.
Yeah,
you should, and don't get used to it. Dogs grow out of it.
I think I might actually change my pronoun, my preferred pronoun, to relish the moment Karen says I can talk.
What I said was put the shoe down, Hannah.
I don't even have a shoe. I don't know what you're talking about.
And then I was like, Hannah, take over so I can deal with this.
There's a dog with a shoe, I'm guessing.
But she's right about the comment section and everything. I just got to read a very, very little bit of it, and I got to hear what you guys said about it. But, I mean, when a guy cannot be human in front of his partner, where is he supposed to go? if he can't be vulnerable, if he can't have his own feelings, because that's a big thing, women not letting their husbands and boyfriends have their own feelings. Hell, they're not even allowed to have their own clothes. You know, I mean, you look at any woman's magazine, there's articles on how to get your boyfriend or husband to dress the way you want him to, how to get him to get rid of the shirt. I can sympathize because I have a the shirt. I think I've mentioned that before. And I still have the same shirt. It's been a couple of years, I think, since the last time I mentioned that. So, of course, they're going to need to go someplace to be treated like human beings because it's not happening all too often at home. You know, if he's not allowed to watch his own television shows, if it's typical guy every time he wants the remote, if he can't ask you to do something for him, but you can ask him to do something for you, and it's not sexist when you do it, but it's sexist when he does it, regardless of what that something is. You know, well, why would he come to you to be human? Why would he come to you with his emotional needs? He's not allowed. So he's going to go somewhere else because they're not going to go away. They're not going to disappear. He's not going to stop being human just because he got married or because he has a girlfriend. You know?
Well,
so yeah, that's where I would start with this. Of course, men need to go outside their relationships when they're dealing with women like the women that comment on this article.
Yeah.
They're not allowed to be human at home.
Yeah, no, that really seems to me like, you know, if you would think that there would be some sympathy for somebody stuck in you know, a marriage that's sort of maybe hitting the skids, or it's, you know, on the rocks, or it's just in a period of difficulty, that the intimacy is gone, right? And there's plenty of excuses for women. Women don't go to sex workers, they just have affairs. And there seems to be plenty of excuses for them. Well, he wasn't meeting her needs, her emotional needs. He wasn't, you know, he wasn't there enough, or whatever. He was working too much, or whatever. In some way he wasn't treating her properly. And that's why she felt the need to step outside of their relationship and hook up with her high school sweetheart on Facebook, right? And you know, have an affair, right? Whereas these men, they're not even having affairs. And I think that that's actually one of the interesting things too, is that when you ask men and women what they feel is the bigger betrayal, right? What would you feel is the bigger betrayal on the part of your partner? Men almost always say sexual cheating, and women almost always say emotional cheating, right? So men will be if she has sex with somebody, even if it means nothing, right? Somebody else. And men and women will say if he falls in love with somebody else, that's the bigger betrayal, even if they never touch each other, right? And so these men are actually, they're seeking out this, you know, intimacy, but they're not doing it in terms of an affair. They're not doing it in terms of something that would actually cause them to do what those women fear when they say emotional cheating is what they would feel is the bigger betrayal, which is the loss of the relationship, right? That's generally what, you know, men have an issue with certainty of paternity and all of those things. So sexual fidelity is more important to them. With women, it's the emotional fidelity and keeping the man coming home, right? And these men are indulging their emotional needs through sex workers in such a way that they're not risking actually wanting to abandon their wives, right? They're doing this so that they can stay with their wives, right? And not be dead inside. And so it's kind of, I mean, the whole thing just is like they're just not allowed. They're not allowed to have an emotional life. They're not allowed to have an emotional needs. They're not allowed to have anything that would resemble any kind of need. And it just, I don't know, the whole thing. And the comments were just freaking toxic. Oh my God.
What boggled my mind was the sex worker, Mrs. Robinson, 58 years old, can charge young men and they'll pay $350 for half an hour.
Yep.
And it's probably not because she has the body of well, maybe she does. Maybe she has the body of a 25-year-old. Maybe she still looks quite young and fresh. At 58,
Highly doubt it.
Yeah.
Highly doubt it. You know, like you can be Bo Derek or Raquel Welch, right? You're still not going to have the body that you had when you were 25.
Yeah, well, yeah, and like I said, I highly doubt it. She probably, I'm sure she looks like a very fit 50-year-old, 50-something.
Well, there is one thing. I have run into 20-year-olds who never got to the point in their lives up at 20, never were as pretty as some 50-year-olds. If you work at it and you start out with, you know, good DNA and you take care of yourself and you don't you know, put trash in your body and stuff like that, you can still be in pretty good shape up into your 60s. It's rare, but I would think if your job was to look sexy, that might be the thing that you put your effort into. So it's possible. It's quite, especially, have you seen some of the social justice warriors that have made it onto YouTube out of college? She may be quite a bit more attractive than some of them.
That be it as it may, it's obvious that her clients are interested in something well beyond the physical. But I'd imagine.
Oh yeah, but I just to be accurate, want to point out being that old doesn't necessarily mean, you know, falling apart.
Oh no, definitely. I'm sure that she keeps herself together, but still, her clients obviously are after something way beyond the physical. And I imagine it's an aspect of maturity that she has. That is, of course, you still have to pay for it, but there's an aspect of maturity in allowing her clients to be vulnerable. And I just wanted to point that out, just the age, 58, when women think that it's about beauty alone.
Well, I think too, you know, an older woman in a lot of ways is sort of stuck in the same situation as you know, your average guy, right, in his 20s and 30s, right, which is, you know, often if you're looking for something, right, you have to put more effort into it, not just into your appearance, but into just making moves and letting your intentions or your desires be known and actually coming out and saying it and opening up, right? Which is, you know, like if you actually want to get some action as a 45-year-old woman or a 50-year-old woman, you're going to actually have to put your cards out a little bit more. You can't play as close to your vest as a young woman can and still have men chasing her, right? And so essentially, I think, you know, maybe there is a little bit of you know, an aspect of commiseration between Mrs. Robinson and these men in terms of, you know, if she's saying to herself, maybe if I wanted a relationship, I would have to actually put in more effort just on the ground, not necessarily into my appearance, but, you know, in concrete terms, to get that.
Although she's still charging $350,
yeah,
$700 an hour.
Yeah, but she's also, I mean, you have to realize that if she's able to charge that much, she's offering something. And what she's offering is probably that kind of attitude, right? Where the relationship, whether it's, you know, 10 years long or half an hour long, right, requires effort on the part of both parties.
Yeah, no, I've heard, and the reason why I bring it up, and I mentioned it, is because a lot of women will hide in the apparent shallowness of men. If you're being out-competed by a 58-year-old woman, and I assume those 20-year-old guys are not dating 58-year-old women. A lot of these guys that she talks about are with her, not their girlfriends or wives. Imagine those 20-year-old guys or men are with probably 20-year-old women. And those 20-year-old women, be it as it may, you know, some of them may not actually be as attractive as Mrs. Robinson, but they're still 20-year-old women. There has to be a good portion of them who are. And yet they're being outcompeted by 58-year-old Mrs. Robinson, who actually knows how to let a guy be vulnerable and actually knows how to listen to what he has to say, rather than simply projecting her own needs and psychological frailties and feelings and et cetera, onto him. So
well, and in listening, to listen without judging everything he says. Because that's another one. I mean, this is probably a woman who can hear you say, I hate my job, I hate my boss, I wonder what would happen if I just quit, without going, what the hell is wrong with you? Don't you have a family to support? Blah, 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 blah. Nag, 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 nag. You know, this is something that you wouldn't get at home necessarily in a lot of households. A lot of households, the first hint that a guy is dissatisfied with his work, his wife's job is to be the cheerleader, to kick him back in there, keep him going. And she's not going to be nice about it. And it's...
I wouldn't use the word cheerleader, maybe drill sergeant.
Yeah, a little bit of both, you know. Oh, you're just down. You just have a case of the Mondays. It's going to be better next week. You just keep going, you know. And at one end, and at the other end, if you walk out on that job, me and the kids are going to go live with my mother. You know, it's just all kinds of threats and all kinds of whatever. But that's what happens. And you don't have that in this situation. You have somebody who listens without judging. Who are you going to pick to spend time with? You know, once again, of course, guys are going to be looking outside of the home when that's the norm.
I just wanted to point out that I think that the cheerleader version, sometimes that can actually be helpful. Sometimes
it can, and especially if it's a career the guy really wants to stick with. And he comes back and says, you know, I'm having a rough time this week because of these problems. But if it's all the time, you know, my job is killing me, this is happening all the time, I've been thinking about a change, and it's a situation where it really would be better for him, but maybe not so financially good for her. A lot of times the woman picks what would be so financially good for her instead of what might be better health-wise for him, which is why women are still outliving men.
I would agree. I have a friend who, whose wife, you know, they were both high earners when they met. They got married, they bought a house, very nice house, and when she got pregnant, had the kid, right, their first kid, she decided, you know, okay, I'm only gonna take 6 months of my maternity leave, right, and then I'm gonna go back to work. And then after 6 months, she's like, I'm not ready to go back. I want to take the full year. I think it's 2 years now you can take, right? Now that's at about 2/3 pay, right? So, and at somewhere in there, he lost the job that he had. And he had to sort of take a demotion and work extra hours to keep up the income that he had been earning when they met. And he started talking about downsizing the house, right? Let's sell this place and buy something more affordable in a more affordable neighborhood. And the whole, no, she wouldn't hear of it. So he's working like mad. He's, you know, 60, 70 hours a week, 80 hours a week sometimes. Working in camp, working on job sites, you know, 16-hour drive away from home. And he was complaining one night, you know, like, it's been 2 months since I've seen my kid or my wife's vagina. And if something doesn't change, right, I'm gonna cheat. I'm gonna fuck somebody else one way or another. Right. And she went back to work part-time, right? Which is, she's making 2/3 of what she was making per hour, and she's making it for half of the number of hours because she chose to work part-time. And, but she still won't downsize the house. And she complains that he's not home, right? You're never home. You're never home. I feel abandoned, blah, blah, blah. You're just not here. Right. And it's like, you know, fuck you, bitch. Sell the house.
Jesus. Oh, go ahead.
It was funny. I wouldn't have realized any of this stuff except for the way other women reacted when my husband and I had to move because his ex-wife moved away from where they were originally raising the kids and then said, well, it's more than Ohio's 75-mile limit, so I don't have to let you see them anymore. And, he was going to have to move or lose his kids. So we moved. And there wasn't really any question about it for me. This is our family. We have to keep our family together. So if there is an outside force that we have no other counter for, we can't stop her from doing that, that's going to move the kids away, then we have to move closer to where they are. That's logical. And I was amazed at how many other women, oh, you can't let him get away with that. You can't let him make you do that. You can't let him make you move away from your career. He'll walk all over you. He's not the one that made the decision. He's not the one that put the kids in that position. He's not the one that put himself in that position. But somehow it was all his fault. And him wanting to continue his relationship with his children, him wanting his daughters and his son to know each other, and me wanting to support that, suddenly that was him walking all over me, me wanting to support my family and keep my family together. Because that's my family. It's his family. It's my family. He's my husband. That makes his family my family. Me wanting to keep my family together. Other women talked about that like he was walking all over me and making me do things I didn't want to do. Now, I'm not saying I wanted to stop being a photographer, but I wanted my family together more than I wanted any of the other things I wanted in my life, because they were the most important thing to me. My family is the most important thing to me. That is why I became part of a family. If your family is not the most important thing to you, then you have no business starting one. And it just blew my mind to learn that stuff. And the more I looked around and the more I heard from other women about the choices that we made in order to make this happen, in order to protect our kids, our household, our family, my husband, his wife, that kept getting criticized over and over again as him walking over me and him making me do things. I made choices that were good for my family. He is my family. And he gets accused of making me do that. That is how women in the United States treat men in the United States. And it's something that our kids have to learn. The next generation of kids has to learn. That is wrong. Your family is a unit. Your partner is your partner. If something happens that you have to deal with that makes life harder and you have a hurdle to go over, you go over it together. And you don't act like somebody made you do it. Yeah. If anybody made me do anything, it's me.
Yeah, no, what drove me crazy, because last summer I drove my 3 kids. I mean, the 2 of them are adults, and one's a teenager. But I drove them out to Vancouver Island to visit their dad. I drove them there. I came back, and then a week later, 8 days later, I drove out there, picked them up, and brought them back. It was just cheaper to do that, and I don't mind driving. And it was a lot cheaper to do that than fly them out, right? And then have them take a bus from the airport to, from the Vancouver airport to Port McNeill, BC, and then take a ferry to Alert Bay, right? I mean, it's just, the logistics of it was just, no, I'll just drive them. And when I was talking about this with my guy's family at a family gathering, the first question from the women, particularly the older women, is, oh, does he support them? Is he paying child support? And I'm like, no, right? He is not in a position where he could pay child support, so he doesn't, and that's fine. Oh, well, I wouldn't, it's like he's getting away with something to them, right? He's getting away with, so I wouldn't do that if he wasn't paying child support. I would never go to that. He wouldn't even see his kids. And I'm like, I'm not doing this for him, well, I am kind of, but, you know, I'm not like, because I don't have any grudges with him at this point. And I want him to do well and have a relationship with his kids, but I'm doing this for my kids. Like, my kids want this. So why wouldn't I do it if it's going to make them happy and keep them connected with their dad, like, who lives way far away, right? And so it's essentially like, but the whole thing was this tutting about how my ex was getting away with, you know, something unbelievably, you know, dastardly, because I was willing to do this. I was willing to allow him to see his kids. And it's like, no, if, you know, if he could drive out here, if he had a vehicle, which he doesn't, but if he could drive out here, he'd be welcome to sleep on my couch and visit his kids as long as he wants, right? It's like, he's still part of their world. Even if we're not married anymore, he's still part of their lives, and they still need to have a connection with him. And it's like, the attitude was just so, like, it was really bitter. It was this bitter, nasty, selfish attitude that just, you know, oh, and if he failed, if he can't pay child support, right? If he fails in life to the point where, you know, he's unable to do this, then he should be, like, just cut him off. Just cut his legs off and push him over the edge, right? So
I have to, the thing is that some of this for me was something that I had to learn. And I had to sort of liquidate some of this behavior in myself. So I'm not going to stand above anyone and say that I'm better than them, because I didn't. Not that I'm saying that you guys are, but in this case, some of the problems that I encounter in challenging this behavior in myself is that there would be a lot of judgment, not just of my husband, Jonathan, who I have said in the past has, as a result of workplace injury, is not able to have a full-time job due to chronic pain issues. And I've said this in the past, and I've had people essentially say that I don't know, I'm supporting a deadbeat or whatever. And in particular, there was this older female, a wife of a friend of my father's, who was incredibly judgmental about the situation and really, really, really put pressure on my father. And in turn ended up putting emotional pressure on me to end the situation, to basically, like, cut this guy off, cut the man that I married off. Eventually my father just said, you know, it's none of your fucking business, to her. But it's stuff like that actually can make it very difficult to maintain emotional support, because sometimes it's just, you get into the situation where you lash out at the person closest to you because you have all of these expectations and judgments. And I am not proud of that. In fact, it's something I'm very ashamed of, that I would transfer someone's judgment onto my husband, but I have done that. So, I mean, if there's any woman listening to this now who has experience trying to fight that in herself, I feel for you. This isn't just something that necessarily comes from the outside in, it comes from the inside out. And it can be really hard to fight it, especially when there's so much pressure on you. It's not just a judgment of the man; it's also a judgment of a woman for somehow being a scab, or breaking the embargo, or whatever the fuck it is that it is they think we do. You know, and I just wanted to put that out there, because sometimes it helps when people know that they're not alone in the fight.
Well, I would have
more than.
Go ahead, Hannah.
I was gonna say it's more than just yourself sometimes when that happens too. I mean, my husband and I were not married legally when our son was born, and I let my family talk me into putting my maiden name on the birth certificate, just in case. And I'm sitting there the whole time going, just in case what? Just in case what? Because he's gonna be his dad no matter what, right? If we don't end up working out, which I never really thought we were not going to end up. It was my family that thought we were not going to end up working out, and I still don't understand what caused them any doubt. But I let myself get talked into that, and then it cost us something like $300 in a court hearing to get that changed, because we were going through other legal issues, and that was after we started looking at moving and everything, and it was just crazy. It's like if I hadn't made that decision in the first place and said, all right, you guys, I'll do what you want, it would have been fine. But I'm sure that had to really hurt, and it was really wrong. A kid should have his dad's name, and that was one that I've always regretted. And it was sort of the thing that galvanized my choice to stand up to my family and say, no, my household that we're trying to get together here, even though we put the cart before the horse, and we didn't prepare before we had a kid that we wanted to have, we're still a separate household, and we're still working towards independence, but we're still a separate household. It's our household, it's our decisions, it's not yours. And it was a big fight. And it was a fight that needed to be had.
Good grief.
But I waited 3 years to start having that fight, when I should have started having it the moment I found out I was pregnant. So it's, in some ways, people are wimps when it comes to their family. And it's our job to, support our spouse and stand up for our spouse. But in some ways, people are wimps when it comes to their families, their childhood families.
Or social pressure.
When you have a new family that you are and the stupid thing is, a lot of it was religious. And I finally had to start quoting Bible verses about a man leaving his mother and a woman leaving her home and all that stuff. And the fact that for better and for worse includes for worse.
Yeah.
Before honestly, I got anywhere.
The more I learn about other people and their lives, the more I'm like super grateful for my parents, like for being born into the family that I was born into, because like my parents, my mom came out and said, not ever while I was married to my ex, but when we split up, she said, well, he wasn't the man I would have picked for you. And I really didn't think that, it was the best idea but he was your choice. And so your dad and I were just, we have always said our daughters are adults. They will make their decisions and we will support them in their decisions. And so they were always very welcoming of him, whether they liked him or not. I think that they liked him on some levels and didn't on others. But they were always very like, no, you're part of the family. You're included. And his 2 sons from previous marriage were also part of the family now. And, they were very accepting, and just, they were willing to let me make my own decisions, make my own judgments, even if they thought I was making a mistake. And it just made things so much easier all around. Your daughter picked a man, you do your best to like him, you look for the good qualities in him, right? You don't dwell on the things that you disapprove of about him, and you just get on with the business of supporting your daughter and helping them out the way you would help out your kids, your kids if they married someone you thought was great. That's how you do it. So it just, I don't know, like so much of this stuff that I hear, when I read those comments under the article that we're still kind of tangentially discussing, it's alien to me in terms of, what I grew up with. And at least in my household, I mean, I certainly saw it in other people's homes, but it was just, I'm just really lucky. I'm just really, really lucky.
So there's some of it that's alien to me, and there's some of it that's not. And like what you described, that's the way my husband's family was. The first time I met them, I was like 5 or 6 months pregnant out of wedlock. And there was no judgment. There was no nothing. They were just, I was family already because I was bringing someone into the family. So, there was no if, there was no and, there was no but. There was just, love and a happy household. And it took my family about 10 years to get to that point with my husband. And that's after we'd been married. They didn't hate him. They weren't mean to him or anything like that. But there was a divide that took quite a long time for them to get over. And that was something that, so I saw both sides of it. And I don't know, I think it's kind of weird for me because my parents were the way that you should be in a relationship, invested in each other's welfare. Like I point that out all the time. Each one of them made sacrifices to make sure the other one was okay. And both of them made sacrifices to make sure that the kids were okay. And when a big decision came along, it wasn't one of them putting their foot down and the other one going, yes, dear. There was a conversation. And they figured out what they wanted to do and what they thought was the best thing. And there would be pros and cons mentioned, and each one would have things to talk about that maybe the other hadn't thought of. And that's what you do. And I looked at the relationships around me, and I had friends that were divorced when I was growing up. It wasn't as common as it is today. Or friends whose parents were divorced, I should say. And I've got a lot of friends who have been divorced. And like half the guys I dated when I was, out of college and everything were divorcees. A lot of them were married right out of high school and were divorcees. And the differences in a lot of it, the differences in those relationships was one side or the other wasn't invested in the partnership. And more often than not, it was the woman. And she was in it for what she could get out of the relationship. She had expectations of what the relationship should be and what the husband should be, but not any expectation of what she should be or what he should have the right to expect of her. And it makes it impossible for you to have an actual relationship when you do that.
That's actually that's a really good point. In terms of if he doesn't go down on you, you should kick him to the curb, right? But if she doesn't want to go down on her guy, he needs to respect that. And it really is, and it's not just in sexual things, it's not just in intimacy things, right? It's sort of everybody. You've heard of the honey-do list, right? The honey-do list. Here's a list of things that I want you to do on your weekend, honey, when you're not working, right? Stain the deck, fix the fence, prune the tree, trim the hedges, right? Cut the grass, I want a frog pond in the backyard, whatever, right? And so you're not allowed, and then you have even 30, 40 years ago, right? My mom would go out to these, buffet dinners with, or potluck dinners with all of my parents' friends, right? And they would go out to these things, and she would do what she did at home, and what she still does at home sometimes, right? Which is she would dish out his food for him. He used to come home from work, sit down at the table. He would hold his plate, and she would ask him how much of this he wants, how much of that, and she would spoon it onto his plate, right? And she would go up to the buffet table or whatever, and she would dish him out what she figured that he wanted, and she'd bring it to him. And I do this with my guy as well, right? When we go out. And her friends were like, don't you feel subservient? Don't you feel subordinate? Don't you feel subjugated doing that? That's just so regressive and retrograde. And, what are you living in the 1850s, and you're his slave, blah, 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 right? But none of these women would ever have a problem with handing their husband a list of things to do on the weekend that are all equally traditional gender expectations, like, I want you to go wash my car, right? Or I want you to shovel the walks, or I want you to, plant some, like a tree, a freaking maple tree in the front yard or whatever, right? And I even had a friend, and she was a rabid feminist friend when I was married and living in BC. She actually, because I was, we had a yard that 3 sides of the yard sloped down toward the house, which is really bad news in a place that gets 300 days of rain a year. So I wanted to terrace the yard to at least get rid of the slope. And so I'm terracing the side yard and the backyard with a pick and a shovel because we didn't have the money to bring in somebody with equipment to do it. And it took me about 3 summers of chipping away, digging up rocks, digging up dirt and gravel, and then chipping through a shelf of hardpan in order to get the bottom part of the yard level. And then I had enough rocks that I dug up that were all the size of my head to build a retaining wall with them, right? And she told me, you're doing it all wrong. You're supposed to rip a page out of a magazine, hand it to your husband, and tell him, make it look like this, right? And I'm like, he works full time. I work 12 hours a week, right? He works during the day. I work in the evenings. If anybody's going to get out during the day and do this, it's not going to be him. And why should he have to do that when he's working so many more hours than I do, right? And she just was completely like, I can't believe you're doing this. I can't believe you're letting him not do this. And I'm like, I'm the one who wanted to do it. And I'm doing it. Like, I just, what, like I have to make him do it? Like, I don't, there's this thing where we're allowed to put these sort of very traditionally masculine expectations on men to serve us in the ways that we need, lift the heavy object, move the piece of furniture across the room. Oh, wait, I actually prefer it where it was to begin with, move it back, right? And we're not allowed to, even out of the goodness of our hearts and willingness, not even being asked to do it, dish up a plate of food and bring it to our man. Because that's subservient.
Well, actually, it isn't. It's gratitude.
It's just affection. It's not even it's not even necessarily gratitude. It's just, he likes it. He likes to have me do that, so I do it. It takes me 45 seconds.
Sometimes the one of the most fun things in the world to do is to make him smile, or to elicit the expression that means he's comfortable, which doesn't necessarily constitute a smile. It doesn't have to be a smile, but sometimes just knowing that you made your partner comfortable after a tough day or whatever there's the sense of enjoyment out of it's different than when you go see a movie you like, or you eat something that tastes good, or what. It's a totally different feeling. And I think it's partly because it's attached to love, and I think it's partly because it's a pride thing. I'm not gonna lie, I do take pride in that when I find something that makes him happy. I am proud of making him happy. I'm proud of being able to do that.
Yeah, no, it's like when Mike is sitting in the chair here with his feet up on the footstool, and he's just gotten home from work, and he's like, oh, it's a little chilly. Could you bring me a blanket, right? And I would get him to throw a blanket, and I, lay it across his legs, and then he says, can you tuck my feet tuck the blanket around my feet. And then I just smile at him and I go, oh, you need to be swaddled, do you? I'm going to swaddle you like a man, right? And then we have a good laugh. And it's just like, he's, so much of our relationship is playful, and it really is sort of these stereotypical man things and woman things that we do, but it's just very playful and silly, and then he's like, yeah, swaddle me like a man, you know it, bitch. And then
and it's that kind of thing I think that's missing in a lot of relationships. You don't even see it much on TV anymore in relationships on television. You used to see it in old movies. You used to see it on old television shows, the back and forth joking, the I want to make you comfortable, the cuteness and the lovey-dovey stuff that people now, they look at, oh, I'm going to get diabetes from watching this,
Oh yeah, no, but it's lovey-dovey stuff, but it's cut with some of that coating they put on sour gummy worms, right?
Uh-huh.
It's like, because you're like, yeah, I'm doing this for you, and yeah, I want you to feel comfortable. Yeah, I'm going to also tease you about it, and then you're going to laugh, and you're just going to throw it back at me, and damn right, bitch, swaddle me like a man, right? And so much of what used to be the relationship on in movies, not so much on TV, but I think in movies, was this kind of playful teasing and fake antagonism. It was fake antagonism.
And it was
right?
there because it's what people identified with.
Yeah, it was
because that's what you do at home.
It was the Bickersons, right? Yeah. The Bickersons. They bicker, but they love each other.
I was about to say that the best part of being in a relationship is when you get a really realistic spider and then you hide around a corner and you wait for them not to be paying attention to you. So it takes a while. So sometimes it takes like 10 minutes. And then you throw that damn thing on their lap. And then
that's just screaming. Mean. That is just mean. Oh my God.
No, that's what you do to the kids.
Yeah. Yeah, or the dog.
Aw.
Oh, no. The dog doesn't understand. Besides which, the dog might eat it. At least, I never really had... My household when I was growing up was always a cat household, and we had a cat that would watch the biggest, ugliest wood spiders go skittering across the kitchen floor and then raise one paw up in the air really fast and slam it down on the spider and then pick it up while it was sitting there twitching and lick it off of its paw. That was like a most delicious delicacy the cat had ever had, was that big nasty looking wood spider.
I had a dog that used to eat when a wasp would be hovering around her. She would eat it or try to, and then get stung. She succeeded once, and then she never did it again.
Yeah, but it's just stuff you laugh at together. But back to this article, a lot of the stuff we've talked about, I think a lot of women today wouldn't understand it. I think maybe there's plenty in our generation that would understand it, but as you get further on in the generations, you get a lot of gals that were raised by single moms that hated their ex-husbands and talked about how hard their lives were and everything. And by the way, folks, if you think being a single mom is hard, try sometime being the guy who pays for all of her shit. I'm sure there's plenty of the guys in our audience that can give you a complete rundown on how hard that is. But
just how hard it is, even just emotionally, to hand over a check to a woman and not know whether any of that money is even going to be spent
for your
on
kids.
The kid. Yeah.
But to be the kids raised in that situation, to be the daughters raised in that situation, you don't learn to identify with men as human beings. You learn to identify with them as walking wallets. You learn to identify with them as the whipping boy. Whenever something goes wrong, it's his fault. Yeah. You learn to identify with the mother saying, well, your father should be doing this, your father should be doing that. You don't learn to identify with them as a well-rounded whole person, a loving human being who needs a reciprocal relationship in order for the relationship you have with him to be a relationship.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think that's part of the problem.
Speaking about the comments, let's read some of these comments.
Oh God.
I'll try to use a really good voice for this.
Okay,
EMS,
good. Be real bitchy.
EMS Truman says, perhaps if women wanted to be perhaps if men wanted to be treated like a god, they should take a leaf out of the Bible and remember they should also put their wives on a pedestal. Was that bitchy enough?
That was really bitchy. That was actually bordering on cunty.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah, you sounded a lot like Butters, or is it Cartman?
Cartman. I can do a Cartman. Respect my authority! Sort of. But yeah, this is being treated like a god. This is just being treated like a human being.
Yeah. Yeah, no, actually having somebody...
This is why there are 5 verses in the Bible about living with a quarrelsome or contentious wife. And the ones that came up first in my search, Proverbs 21:19. I'm not sure if this is the New International Version or the King James Version, so if you're picky, don't blame me, blame Google. It is better to live in a corner of a roof than in a house shared with a contentious woman. Proverbs 25:24. It is better to live in a corner of the roof than in a house shared with a contentious woman. Proverbs 21:19. It is better to live in a desert than with a contentious and vexing woman. Proverbs 27:15. A constant dripping on a day of steady rain and a contentious woman are alike. And Proverbs 19:13. A foolish son is destruction to his father, and the contentions of a wife are a constant dripping. The king who wrote the Proverbs had, 500 wives?
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah.
We have a few less of these creatures.
If anybody knew, he knew.
Honestly, every once in a while, my guy jokes about, if and when I make it rich, I'm going to have like 4 wives. And I'm like, oh God, you don't want that. You do not want that. Just spend the money on a hooker, right? And yeah, have one wife, because you
definitely don't want more than one wife in the same house, because women who live together, their periods will sync up and they'll have PMS at the same time, and then you have to deal with double.
PMS and double stereo. Okay,
yes, PMS in stereo.
I can sense this
as bad as having a wife and a daughter, except one of them doesn't have authority over the other, and they're both going to try to have authority over each other.
Yeah, no, that's the problem. Like there was one of the Muslim guys that I worked with back when I was waitressing. He said he was from Lebanon, and you're allowed to have 4 wives in Lebanon, and he said his dad had 3. And the only time, and apparently, it's legal to physically discipline your wives in Lebanon. And he said the only time his dad ever did that was he had 3 wives, and he would go out to work every day, and he would come home, and they would be screaming at each other and fighting all the time, and just really being abusive toward each other. Right. One day he came home and he found 2 of them covered with bruises and scratches, bleeding scratches and cuts, and the 3rd one locked in the bathroom sobbing. And that was when he said, okay, this is where I actually have to do something. And so he paddled their bottoms and said that if he ever came home to a scene like that ever again, they would be getting it worse. And Sam said that from that point on, the women would still fight and bicker, but all of their
all of their antagonism toward each other was sort of in that passive aggressive kind of way, right? And they never actually got physically aggressive with each other again. And but I mean, like, can you imagine keeping the peace in that kind of house?
I would not want to be that man.
Oh, being held responsible, because he's responsible for what they do. So
My
if one of them kills the other, right, then, you know, he's going to be held responsible. Like, you could have stopped it. You're in charge of the household, right?
He
and it's
basically
like,
had 3 children that he had to give adult privileges to, but they would behave like children, and then he could get in trouble for their behavior.
yeah. So I mean, it's like these people who say, like, it's allowed in Sharia to beat your wife or whatever, right? And yeah, okay, it's allowed, but that doesn't mean that the majority of men are going to actually do that unless it's an extreme circumstance like that. He came home to find, like, 2 of his wives freaking beating the shit out of each other, and the third one terrified, locked in the fucking bathroom, right? Like,
yeah, well, okay. It's aside from I just want to pull it on topic. I'm not actually worried about this topic. I'm just pulling it back onto the topic of the.
Oh, that article.
You
yes,
think
yeah.
you think about that
comment.
situation. You think about that situation, and that is female nature on parade at some of its worst, right? But that is, how do you relate as a partner to people who are going to act like that? What do you get out of that partnership as part of your relationship with those people? And what adult conversation do you have with people who act like that? What intimacy, what emotional intimacy can you have with someone who acts like that? And if you think I'm just talking about Islam, I'm not. Because there are women right here in the United States who are not religious at all, who maybe were raised in a Western religion of some sort. Maybe they're Christian, maybe they're pagan, maybe they're not religious at all, maybe they're some other religion, but they act just like that. Maybe there's not 3 of them living in the same house together, but they throw temper tantrums. They get physically violent when they're angry. They tell off everybody and their uncle if something goes minorly wrong during their day. If they go to the store and they get something and it's defective, they can't just take it back and say, hey, this one was defective, I'd like a different one. No, it has to be that salesperson's worst day ever. And,
yeah, my daughter works customer service at Walmart. Yeah. She could tell you some fucking stories.
And I could tell you some stories I'd be embarrassed about when I've had a rough time returning something that I thought was defective. And before I grew up, and I didn't grow up right away when I was considered an adult legally, I acted like that. So I'm speaking from experience, especially with the anger management thing. It's a lot more of a challenge for a female with an anger management problem who doesn't violate the law and get herself in legal trouble to get the people around her to realize that this is a problem and needs treatment, because that kind of behavior is accepted.
Yeah.
You can get away with acting like that, even when you don't want to, even when you're embarrassed that you did it and you feel bad about the pain that you put on somebody else's face. Other people are like, well, they should have just let you return it. No, I shouldn't have acted like that. That was wrong. Can't you see I'm embarrassed because I did that? Because it was wrong. If a guy did that, he'd be in jail.
Yeah.
Why are you giving me a pass? That makes it even more embarrassing. But women do get a pass on that kind of behavior. Right here, right in my neighborhood. This one of the scariest people I ever met in Dayton was the chick that was having an argument by herself, finishing an argument that apparently she had with someone else in the middle of the night, walking down the street that I was walking up to my workplace.
Oh, and, I actually saw one of those just this afternoon when I was coming out of the dollar store, and she was walking in and she was screaming, and I looked for an earpiece. There was no earpiece. So she wasn't screaming into a phone, but she was screaming profanities and calling somebody names. And then she just walks into this dollar store, and I'm like, oh my God, that poor Chinese woman who runs the dollar store is just gonna have to deal with her now, because
Yeah. So I like the comments don't surprise me. I wish they did, but they don't.
yeah.
But and it's because it's like what you described with the 3 wives and the temper and the beating on each other and all that. It's not all that different from the behavior of Western women. And
No.
it's one of the reasons why it's more embarrassing than offensive to read that one post in their Red Pill where, they said it's standard for women to not mature past where men are expected to mature at the age of 14, which we need to change and needs to change.
Yeah. But I mean, you look at it and you see, Sharia is this horrible, horrible system that treats women unequally. Well, yes, it's infantilizing, right? But it's infantilizing, but it actually gives men certain tools to allow them to, enforce standards of behavior in their homes. The man is the adult in the home, and the women are like children. Okay, but how is here too, the man is often expected to be the adult in the home and the woman is expected to be a child, but you're not allowed any tools to actually deal with them as if they're a child, even when
that's a change that feminism made. See,
yeah,
it used to be, although it didn't quite used to be identical to Sharia, it used to be that women's limitations, the ones that feminists fought so hard to get rid of, those limitations were based on men's obligations.
Yes.
And feminists fought to get rid of those limitations while maintaining men's obligations.
Yeah.
And that's why we have the problems we have now. It's okay to say, you know what, these limitations are bad, we want to get rid of them. All right, that's fine. Get rid of the obligations too. That makes it balanced. Everybody is obligated to take care of themselves. And nobody is obligated towards each other. You make your agreements when you make your family and you make your relationships and you grow the fuck up. But we didn't do that. We formed a society where the limitations on women and the control that men had over women, that was alleviated, but the obligations were kept in place and the control that women have over men was kept in place. So, and once again, it's no wonder that men look outside their relationships when they are in this situation, when they deal with a woman who is holding them to those obligations, who wants no limitations on herself, who doesn't feel like she should have an equal set of obligations to him, who doesn't care about him as a person as much as she does about him as a wallet and a trophy, really. No wonder he's going to go outside of that. Once again,
and I do want to stress. I do want to stress too. It's 11% of Australian men who visit sex workers, right?
Yeah.
And so I mean, it's a minority of men who are put in a position where they feel like they have to do that. And so this is not, by no means is this.
No, it's not an indictment of all women.
Making an indictment on all women, but it is making an indictment on society that essentially women get a pass. Women who do this get a pass when they do it. Women are allowed to emotionally neglect their partners. Women are sometimes even praised for emotionally neglecting their partners.
Which is stupid. Because if you're emotionally neglecting him, are you really his partner?
No.
I just wanted to point something out. Despite the fact that, and it probably speaks to the fact that it's not really consistently, despite the fact that Islam supposedly allows men to, like, I guess the guardianship, or prior to the guardianship system in Victoria, to physically punish their wives to an extent, by the way. Not apparently, is it the same as they can leave no visible mark, etc.? Yeah, okay. So there is a limitation in Sharia law for how much physical violence a man can inflict on a woman. No provision for the reverse. And if you look at the statistics that I've seen, there is actually a lot of husband beating that goes on in the Middle East, which then the husbands have to take responsibility for. And I wonder if it's not just an extension of the way we say things like curb your woman, or control your woman.
Yeah.
As a prelude to making a man take responsibility for a woman's behavior. And usually what results is you don't like her behavior, so you beat the crap out of him. Yeah. It's not really a situation where you truly believe he has any control over her behavior. It's just that you don't want to punish her, so you punish him instead.
Yeah.
And it's nothing new. I mean, there's old wood sketchings of, I think, what is it called, a skimmington or a shimmington or whatever, when the skimmington, when the whole town would turn out. And if it was a guy who was abusive to his wife, they would take him out and beat the living daylights out of him.
Yeah.
If it was a woman who was abusive to her husband, they would take him out and put a dress on him and ride him around all over town and ridicule him for not keeping her under control. But he couldn't abuse her to get her under control, because then they would beat the hell out of him.
Yeah.
So he was in the wrong both ways.
Yeah, no, it's a double bind. It really is. If you as a man you end up with the wrong woman, holy shit.
So. I just wanted to point out that I don't know I think, quite honestly, this is no advocacy for Sharia law at all. I think, quite honestly, holding men and women responsible for their behaviors towards their partners legally, and I don't know if you can do it equally. That's the problem, right? But if we can address that issue, that would be the way to go, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And I don't even think that's ever been tried. There's never been a society that said, hey, ladies, if you beat your husband.
Yeah, there was.
It didn't
last very long. It lasted 10 years. And
really?
Feminists fought tooth and nail.
Oh,
eventually
they
replaced the Family Violence Services or Protection and Services Act of 1984. That was a genderless domestic violence law. That the whole goal of that law was to basically, if they would arrest you for doing it in a bar to a stranger, they should be arresting you for doing it in the home to a family member. That was it. It wasn't about breaking up families the way the Violence Against Women Act is. It wasn't about if you have an argument, that's domestic violence and somebody should be taken away. It was about, if you are beating the hell out of someone, that's assault. And it doesn't matter who you do it to. It's still assault. And if somebody is trapped in a relationship with somebody who does that to them over and over again, it doesn't matter if they're male or female, it doesn't matter if they're an adult or a child, there should be a shelter that they can go to get away from that. And that is what that law was put in place to do. That was our legislators' first response to feminism's fight regarding domestic violence. And feminists hated it. And they took 10 years of fighting and lying to get Congress to change it to the Violence Against Women Act.
And this, incidentally, is why we do not like feminism.
Because that initial law.
I love feminism. I love feminism because they just want equality.
Yeah. No, that initial law, the shelters created by that initial law, they housed everybody. That you didn't have to be a particular gender, you didn't have to be a particular age. If you needed out, you got out. And now there's I think 5 shelters in the U.S. that house men, and there's not as many beds in any of them for men as there are for women.
Yeah, and
that's
the bed's probably in most of them. If it's
in a hotel.
Canada, if it's anything like Canada, the beds in shelters that are open to men are not reserved specifically for men. They're unisex beds.
Yeah, so if there's a man and a woman vying for it, the woman gets it first.
Yeah, there are beds reserved for women, and then there are unisex beds. It's just like
a lot of places,
homeless shelters.
Most places you call, if you're a man and your wife is beating you, they will send you to anger management classes. If you're really lucky, they'll put you up in a hotel for a couple of days. That's it. That's all you get. And it's it's totally unequal. But once again, that was something that feminists fought specifically to put in place.
Well,
they fought specifically to take away men's ability to get out of abusive relationships.
This reminds me of something Michael Kimmel said in The Red Pill, right? And anybody who wants to get a taste of what was in The Red Pill should go to An Ear for Men, the YouTube channel An Ear for Men, and watch Paul Elam's rebuttals of the feminists that were interviewed for The Red Pill. But Michael Kimmel said essentially that MRAs, you know, if what they're saying is true, right, that there's gender symmetry, which there isn't, and it's not true, but let's, for the sake of argument, say it is true. We need more funding, more shelters, blah, 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 blah. But what do the MRAs do? What do they say? No, we want to get rid of these shelters for women. No, we don't want to get rid of them, right? We want them to share the resources equally based on need, not on genitals. And, you know, honestly, maybe he got that idea from Mark Angelucci's lawsuit against the network of I guess battered women's or domestic, well, you might as well call them battered women's shelters because they don't admit men. In California, he launched a lawsuit essentially saying that they were in violation of UNRRA, which is California's equal rights legislation that requires that there can be no discrimination based on gender. And these shelters, they and I was talking with somebody, and this was years ago, right? Talking with somebody online, and they were saying, you know, oh, he just wanted to close them down. And he was like, why? How do you know that? Well, because his lawsuit was like, it's illegal to operate in this way, so either admit men or close them down. And I'm like, yeah, they're operating in violation of the freaking law of the state of California. If they do not stop discriminating, they need to be shut down, right? And something else needs to take their place. That doesn't mean getting rid of domestic violence shelters. That's not what Mark Angelucci wanted. He had to hold that threat over their heads. If you do not comply and start serving men in some way, right, you will be shut down. Otherwise, person says to me, oh, and all of the money that was spent on the lawsuit, right, you know, fighting this lawsuit, could have gone to domestic violence victims, right? And I'm like, okay, number one, it was their choice to fight it in court rather than comply with the law. Number two, I know, because I have firsthand knowledge, right, that they were represented pro bono. So they weren't spending any of their money fighting this lawsuit as far as it could go, right, to prevent men from having access to domestic violence services in California. Right?
So basically,
these
women put up.
That's Mark Angelucci wanting to shut down domestic violence shelters.
And so basically, these women put up that much of a fight in order to avoid treating men as equal human beings.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we're dealing with. I know to relate
Bring
that
it back on topic.
to this
back on topic.
This is what happens every time. It's not just with domestic violence. It's not just with the big issues. It's not just with any particular political issue. Anytime the choice is treat a man like a human being or walk away from the benefit, women act like a benefit is being taken away from them. It doesn't matter whether it's domestic violence victim shelters. It doesn't matter whether it's, what do you mean we can't ask men to pay for our birth control? What do you mean we can't tax men to pay for our birth control? Even if it's, I don't like your shirt, therefore you have to get rid of it. You know, it's the moment you start to have to allow a man to have his own and women from having functional relationships.
Okay.
And it's because women forget how to love.
All right, I think
Well, Allison, I gotta say this. This is something, I'm gonna go back to the Bible. Even though I don't go to church and I don't get into religion and everything, women hold this up all the time. This is what women expect of men. They expect that verse that gets read out at pretty much every Christian wedding ceremony, right? You hear it where they'd say love is patient and kind, doesn't envy and doesn't boast and doesn't dishonor others, and it's not self-seeking and doesn't get mad easy and doesn't carry grudges and doesn't delight in evil and rejoices in the truth and is always protective and always trusting and always has hope and is always perseverant. Those are things that women expect of men, right? But they never understand that that expectation should go both ways. If you expect him to not carry a grudge, don't carry a grudge. When you get into an argument, it's about the thing you're arguing about right now. It's not about the thing that he said to you 10 years ago in another argument. Drop it. It's over. You know, and be proud of your husband's accomplishments just like you're proud of your own. And don't bitch about him to your friends. And it's one thing to joke about, men never go to the doctor, blah, 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 her. Okay.
Yeah.
And women don't understand how to use maps, and they're always bitching about stopping to ask for directions, har. That's okay. But to actually badmouth your partner to your spouse, men don't generally do that. And women shouldn't either, Don't dishonor your spouse. Don't distrust your spouse. Don't think ill of him the first time that he comes home late from work. Maybe it's because he works hard. This is...
And if you struggle with any of this...
this is basic stuff. And if you struggle with any of this, don't get married because you're not ready.
Well, and also, I would say if you struggle with any of this, because anybody can improve. Anybody can get better. In fact, I would disagree. I think as long as you are focused on trying to be the best that you can, even if you don't the best you can be when you get married, if you try to be better and to care and love your partner, and try to understand the world from his point of view, even if you make mistakes, even if don't get it right off the bat, if you're constantly striving to actually be better, then sometimes you need to actually be in the situation before you start to be able to manage the situation. So I would disagree. Don't get married if you aren't willing to grow. But if you haven't grown yet, as long as you're willing to grow, then you might find marriage to be the right situation in which you can grow as a person and learn to love more deeply.
I would say be ready to not have any expectations of your husband that you think are unfair for him to have of you.
Yeah.
All right, but this is the end, my friend.
This is the end. My only friend. The end.
The end.
I'm not singing.
Yeah, I know.
It's allergy month.
We understand. I mean, Karen was snorkeling at the beginning of this. I think she was eating something.
I was eating licorice. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I thought I was muted.
It was no, you were talking while you were eating licorice.
Oh, yeah, no, because I had to talk while I was chewing licorice, and it's chewy, so I had to finish chewing it.
Yeah, it was very smacky. But okay. So the after show, if we are about to go into the after show, if you're interested in being able to see our after shows, become a patron, www.patreon.com/honeybadgerradio. And if you want to hang out and have extended conversations about men's rightsy types issues and men's issues and gender politics and all kinds of other stuff, if you want to come to a community where everybody's allowed to disagree, then consider joining our Discord, which you can do through Patreon as well. And what's on tonight's menu is we're going to look at the discussion between Blair and Lacey. Not the whole thing. We're not going to be able to get through the whole thing.
I haven't watched that. I was going to watch it today, but then I have this puppy.
Yeah, you have your
And-
puppy.
And I have a grumpy, bitchy older dog who doesn't like the puppy.
Well, she doesn't want to be replaced.
Yeah, no, she's starting to warm up to her because it's like she's starting to realize that it's really not that big a change. But
Yeah. Okay, but yeah, if you want to join us for talking about Blair versus Lacey, should be interesting. I doubt we'll get more than 10 minutes in, but we'll just keep hammering at it. Yeah. Okay, Mike, are you there, sir?
Yes.
Dance us outside, Mike.
Do I press the button? I'm going to press the button.
Can you believe that you were
Press the
speaking
button.
for like 15 seconds and Karen interrupted you 3 times?
Dance
And then
us
you interrupted
outside,
me.
Mike. Oh my God.
Hannah, interrupt me. You're the only one who hasn't. Too late.
I didn't do nothing.
All right. I'm pressing the button in 3, 2, 1. Press.